Evelyn Harper's home sat quietly on the edge of Portland, Oregon, tucked between tall cedar trees and fields that turned golden every fall. She had grown used to the silence of her days. Sway mornings carried nothing more than the sound of her kettle whistling or the steady hum of the fridge. At 70 years old, she thought she had seen most surprises life had to offer. That was until the afternoon her grandson arrived at her doorstep. The day began like any other. Evelyn woke early, wrapped herself in a knitted shawl, and brewed her coffee. The air outside smelled of rain, and soft mist clung to the windows. She liked mornings like that, when the world felt gentle and far away. She had planned to spend the day reading and perhaps baking a pie. But life decided to interrupt those plans. Around noon, she heard the unexpected sound of tires crunching over gravel. Her small house didn't usually get visitors. Curious, she pulled back the lace curtain in her living room and froze at the sight. A sleek silver car had pulled into her driveway. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a tall young man with broad shoulders and a confident stride. For a moment, Evelyn's heart stumbled. The way he walked, the tilt of his head, it was so familiar. It's almost like looking at her son years ago. Then he looked up at the window, and she knew at once. "Ethan," she whispered, her hand pressed to her lips. Her grandson. She hurried to the door and opened it before he could knock. "Grandma." He called out with a grin, his voice warm and alive. In 2 quick steps, he was at the porch, wrapping his arms around her with the kind of hug only youth could give strong. Unhesitant, filled with affection. "Oh, Ethan," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. "Look at you. You've grown so much." He laughed. "It's been too long, hasn't it?" It had been nearly 3 years since she last saw him. He had been busy with college, moving across the country, and starting a life of his own. She thought their distance might stretch into many more years. Yet there he was, standing tall and grown, bringing the energy of his age into her quiet home. Evelyn stepped back, letting him inside. The scent of his cologne mixed with the faint smell of rain carried through the door. He set down a small suitcase by the entryway. "I hope you don't mind, Grandma. I thought I'd stay a few days." Her heart lifted at those words. "Mind? Ethan, you could stay forever if you wanted." He smiled, the same smile she remembered from when he was a little boy, sneaking extra cookies from her kitchen. But now there was something deeper in his expression, something she couldn't quite place. The afternoon unfolded quickly. They shared tea in her small kitchen, the clock ticking softly on the wall. Evelyn listened eagerly as Ethan spoke about his life in Boston, his studies, his friends, the way the city never seemed to sleep. He had a way of talking that reminded her of his grandfather. Animated hands, bright eyes, and words filled with ambition. She felt proud, so proud to see the boy she once held in her arms, now speaking of dreams that belonged to men after tea. She made him her famous apple pie, the one he always begged for as a child. He ate with the same excitement he used to, grinning after each bite and telling her no one else could bake like she did. The house seemed to come alive with his laughter. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt young again, as though time had softened and carried her back to days when her house was filled with family. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold and pink. They sat together at the old wooden table, the dishes stacked to one side, the room quiet except for the ticking of the clock. Evelyn thought the day had been perfect, a gift she didn't deserve but was grateful for. She believed Ethan had come only to visit, to share stories, to remind her she was not forgotten. But then she noticed a change in him. His smile softened, his hands fidgeted on the table, and his gaze lowered as though he was carrying something heavy. Evelyn leaned forward. "Ethan, is something wrong?" He hesitated, then met her eyes. "Grandma, I need to ask you something." Her chest tightened. His tone was different, serious in a way that made her heart beat faster. She reached for his hand gently. "What is it, darling?" He swallowed hard, as if unsure whether to speak at all. "It's about the past. About love. About you." The words struck her like a wave. She had expected stories about college, or maybe a confession about trouble with friends. But this was different. Her breath caught, her pulse quickened. Memories she had buried for decades stirred in her chest. Me. She whispered, "What do you mean?" Ethan looked at her with steady eyes, the kind that reminded her of his grandfather's when he was young. I found something. Something about you. And I need to know the truth." Evelyn froze. The room, the ticking clock, the fading sunlight all seemed to pause around her. She hadn't spoken of the past in years. She hadn't dared. But now, her grandson had arrived at her doorstep not just for pie and stories, but with questions that could open doors she had long since locked. For the first time that day, Evelyn didn't feel like a grandmother. She felt like a woman standing at the edge of a secret she thought no one would ever discover. And she knew this visit was not going to be simple at all. The silence after. Ethan's words felt heavy. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She stared at her grandson, his eyes steady and searching, and she realized he had not come here for a casual visit. He had come carrying something, and whatever it was had been pressing on him for a long time. Evelyn tried to steady her voice. "What is it you found, Ethan?" He reached into his backpack that sat by the chair. From it, he pulled out a small, worn envelope. Its edges were creased, the paper yellowed by age. He laid it carefully on the table between them, almost as if it were fragile. Evelyn's breath caught the moment she saw it. She recognized that handwriting instantly, the looping script that once made her heart skip beats. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "Where did you get this?" Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "I was helping Mom clean out some of her things last spring." This was tucked away in a box at the bottom of her closet. "I don't think she meant for me to see it. But when I opened it, I knew it was important." "Grandma, this letter?" He hesitated, then looked directly at her. "It's not from Grandpa." Evelyn closed her eyes. A storm of memories rushed through her. The letters. The ones she thought had been lost forever. The ones she had prayed she would never have to explain. Ethan waited, his hands folded, his expression both curious and gentle. "Grandma, who was he? Who wrote this to you? You looked so young in the photograph I found, and in this letter. He writes like he loved you more than anything in the world." Her lips trembled. "Ethan, it was a long time ago. A different life." He leaned closer, his voice low. "But it was your life. I don't just want to know the version of you who raised kids and baked pies. I want to know the woman you were before all that. I want to know your story, please." Evelyn studied his face. He was no longer a child asking innocent questions. He was a man, searching for truth, searching for the pieces of family history that no one had ever spoken aloud. She realized she couldn't hide forever. Her hand brushed the envelope. The touch of the paper made her tremble. Finally, she said softly, "His name was James. And yes, Ethan, I loved him. More than I can ever put into words." Ethan's eyes widened, but he stayed quiet, listening. Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the window, where night had begun to settle. The story she had locked away for 50 years was now clawing its way to the surface. "I met James when I was just 19, she said slowly. "He was different from anyone I had ever known. Charming, kind, and full of dreams. He made me feel alive in ways I didn't know were possible. We thought we had the world ahead of us. We thought nothing could break us apart." Her voice faltered, but she continued. "But your great-grandparents, they didn't approve? James didn't have money. He didn't come from the right family. They wanted me to marry someone steady, someone who could give me a secure life. And in those days, a young woman didn't have much choice." Ethan frowned. "So they forced you?" She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "Not with chains, but with pressure, with words, with fear. They told me I would regret it forever if I chose him. And in the end, I let go of the man I loved most." The words hung heavy between them. Ethan looked down at the letter again, his voice softer now. "And you never told anyone?" Evelyn's hands trembled. "I couldn't. I married your grandfather, and he was a good man. I built a family, raised children, lived a respectable life. But inside me, there was always this quiet ache. A part of me that wondered every single day what might have been." Ethan's chest rose and fell as he absorbed her words. "So all these years you've carried this secret alone?" She nodded. Her tears fell freely now. It's the kind of love you don't forget, Ethan. You move on, you smile. You live, but in the quiet moments, it comes back like a shadow. Ethan was silent for a long time. He turned the envelope over in his hands, tracing the faded ink with his fingers. I think Mom found more of these, he said at last. She just never told you. I found only this one, but it makes me wonder if there were others she kept hidden. Evelyn's heart sank. Why would she do that? I don't know, Ethan admitted. Maybe she thought she was protecting you. Maybe she was angry, but I couldn't ignore it. When I read those words, Grandma, I've never read anything so full of love. He wrote like you were his entire world. Evelyn pressed her hand against her chest, her breathing uneven. She hadn't heard James's words in decades, hadn't dared imagine what they might have said after she left him. Now, with her grandson sitting across from her, the past felt painfully alive again. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady but emotional. Grandma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Do you still think of him? Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his. The question pierced her in a way she hadn't expected. She wanted to deny it, to keep her composure, but her heart betrayed her. Every day, she whispered. Even now. The room fell silent again, the clock ticking like a heartbeat in the background. Ethan didn't judge her. He didn't look disappointed. Instead, he looked at her with deep compassion, as though he finally saw her not just as his grandmother, but as a woman who had once loved deeply and lost painfully. Then he asked the question that made Evelyn's breath catch. Grandma, what if he's still out there? What if James never forgot you either? The words shook her to her core. She stared at Ethan, unable to speak, her mind spiraling with possibilities she hadn't dared entertain in years. Could James still be alive? Could he still think of her? Or had he moved on, building a life she was no longer part of? Ethan's gaze was steady. Would you want to know? If you had the chance to see him again, would you take it? Evelyn's lips parted, but no answer came. The question hung in the air like a flame, burning through the walls she had built around her heart, and for the first time in decades, she felt the ache of longing rise again, stronger than ever. Evelyn sat very still at the table, her hand resting on the faded envelope as though it might disappear if she let go. Ethan's question echoed in her chest. What if James was still out there? It was a thought she had buried for decades, and now it rose again with a force that shook her. She looked across at her grandson, who sat patiently, waiting for her answer. His eyes filled with compassion. Her voice was low when she finally spoke. Ethan, I never thought I'd tell this story, but maybe it's time. You deserve to know. He leaned forward, his face lit with quiet attention. Evelyn drew a slow breath and began. I met James when I was 19. I was young, full of dreams, eager for life. He was everything I wasn't: confident, adventurous, unafraid to chase what he wanted. He worked at the bookstore downtown, the one with the creaky wooden floors. I'd go there almost every afternoon, pretending to browse just so I could talk to him. He always had a book in his hand, and he would ask me questions about what I liked to read. Soon, it wasn't about the books anymore. It was about us. Her lips curved faintly at the memory. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever did. We would walk for hours along the river, talking about what our lives could be. He wanted to travel, to write, to live with passion. And I wanted that too. We fell in love fast, the kind of love that sweeps you off your feet before you even realize it's happening. Ethan listened without interrupting, though his expression softened with each word. But my parents didn't see him the way I did. Evelyn continued, her voice trembling. To them, James was nothing more than a dreamer, with no steady job, no secure future. They wanted me to marry a man who was stable, respected, able to give me a house and children without worry. James offered me love, but not certainty. And in their eyes, that wasn't enough. Her hands twisted together. I tried to fight it, Ethan. I told them I didn't care about money or reputation, that I just wanted him. But in those days, a young woman had very little say against her family's wishes. They told me if I married James, I would ruin my life. They said I'd regret it forever." Her eyes misted as she whispered, "So one night I met James by the river. I told him I couldn't go against them. He begged me to run away with him, to leave everything behind. For one terrifying, beautiful moment, I almost said yes. But fear won. I walked away." Evelyn's voice cracked, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to steady herself. Ethan reached across the table and gently squeezed her fingers. "Grandma," he murmured, his tone full of understanding. She swallowed hard and continued, "I married your grandfather soon after. He was a good man. Kind, steady, everything my parents wanted for me. I grew to love him in my own way. We had a family, we built a home, and I will never dishonor his memory. But Ethan," she paused, her eyes glassy with tears, "not a single day went by when I didn't think of James. Not one." Ethan's face was somber, but he didn't look shocked. In fact, he looked as though he had expected her answer. "You never tried to find him?" he asked softly. Evelyn shook her head. "How could I? In those days, we didn't have phones and social media the way you do now. People moved, addresses changed. And even if I had found him, I was married. I couldn't risk hurting your grandfather or tearing apart the family. So I stayed silent. I tucked the memories away and kept them in a place no one could touch." Her grandson's expression grew firm, though his voice remained gentle. "But he never forgot you, Grandma. Not if he wrote letters like this one." She touched the envelope again, her hands trembling. "Do you know what it says inside?" "Yes," Ethan admitted. "I read it. He wrote about waiting for you by the river. He said he believed you'd change your mind. He said he would never stop loving you." Evelyn's tears fell freely now. She turned her face away, overcome by the ache of a memory that felt as raw as the day it happened. "I never went back," she whispered. "And all this time, I wondered if he stood there, waiting, hoping." The pain in her voice filled the room, and Ethan's heart ached for her. He reached across the table again. "Grandma, you've lived your whole life carrying this. Maybe it's not too late to see if he's still alive. Maybe you deserve that closure, maybe even another chance." Evelyn gave a small, sad laugh. "I'm 70, Ethan. What chance do I have now?" He shook his head. "Don't say that. You always tell me love doesn't disappear, that it's never too late to live fully. Maybe this is your chance to believe your own words." She gazed at him, her chest tightening. He looked so much like his mother, but in that moment, she also saw James in him the same intensity. The same refusal to give up. "You remind me of him," she admitted softly. "Your stubbornness, your heart. You have his spirit." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's why I found this letter. Maybe I was meant to bring it back to you." The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the silence. Evelyn felt torn between the weight of her past and the fragile hope her grandson was offering her. For 50 years, she had told herself the story was over. But sitting there with Ethan, the truth pressed against her chest. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe the story had simply been waiting for a new chapter. Her grandson's next words sealed it. "Grandma, if James is still out there, don't you want to know? Don't you want to see if love really can last a lifetime?" Evelyn's lips parted, but no answer came. Her mind raced with images: the young man with books in his hands, the river at sunset, the sound of his laughter. She could almost hear his voice whispering her name. And for the first time in half a century, she dared to wonder, what if Ethan was right? The morning light streamed through Evelyn's curtains as she sat on the edge of her bed, the letter lying open on her lap. She had barely slept, her mind turning over Ethan's words. What if James was still out there? For years she had buried the thought. But now it pulsed through her like something alive. When she came downstairs, Ethan was already waiting at the table with his laptop. "Grandma," he said quickly, "I've been searching all night. I found a few namesmen around James's age living in nearby towns. I think one of them might be him." Her breath caught. "Ethan, I know it sounds crazy," he said, "but it's possible. And even if he's not here anymore, maybe his family is. Don't you want to at least know?" She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her teacup. A part of her wanted to stop him, to say it was too late, that the past should remain untouched. But another part, louder, braver, longed to know the truth before it was too late. "All right," she whispered. "Show me." Ethan turned the screen toward her. Her eyes scanned the list of names, each one sending a jolt of memory through her. Finally, her gaze froze on one. James Whitaker, 72, lives in Maine. Her heart stumbled. Maine? Not so far. Not impossible. That could be him, Ethan said, watching her closely. Evelyn pressed her fingers to her lips, overwhelmed. But what if he doesn't remember me? What if he's moved on? What if? Grandma, Ethan interrupted gently, the real question is, what if he hasn't? Her chest tightened. She thought of her husband, the life she had lived, the family she had built. Nothing would erase that. But deep in her soul, a small flame had never gone out. A week later, Ethan convinced her to make the trip. The drive to Maine felt both endless and too fast. Evelyn sat quietly, staring out at the rolling fields and winding roads, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan tried to ease the tension with gentle conversation. But she remained wrapped in her thoughts. When they finally pulled into a small coastal town, Evelyn's heart raced. The address they had found led to a simple white house near the water, its porch framed by wild roses. Ethan parked the car and turned to her. "Are you ready?" She shook her head, tears already filling her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this." "You don't have to go in," Ethan said softly. "But you came all this way. Maybe just knock." Evelyn drew a shaky breath. Her body trembled as she stepped out of the car, the salty air brushing against her skin. Each step toward the porch felt heavier than the last. When she reached the door, she lifted her hand, hesitated, and finally knocked. The sound echoed through her, and for a moment, silence pressed back. Then footsteps approached. The door creaked open, and there he was, James older, his hair white, his face marked by time. But his eyes, those deep, warm eyes, were the same. The moment he saw her, he froze, his hand still on the doorknob. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "James," she whispered. For a long heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he whispered her name soft, trembling as though he didn't dare believe it. "Evelyn." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. In an instant, his face crumpled with emotion. He stepped onto the porch, his voice shaking. I thought I'd never see you again." Evelyn covered her mouth, overcome. "I wanted to come back. I wanted to," her voice broke. "But life, it pulled me away." He reached for her hand, gently, as though afraid she might vanish. "I waited for you," he said, his voice raw. "Every evening by the river. I thought you'd change your mind." "I almost did," she whispered. "But I was too afraid. And I've lived with that choice every day since." Behind them, Ethan watched silently from the car, his heart swelling at the sight of two lives reconnecting after so many years. James's grip tightened on her hand. "We've lost so much time," he murmured. "But maybe we still have some left." Evelyn's tears fell freely now. "I don't know what's left of me to give, James. I'm not that young girl anymore." He shook his head, his smile soft, tender. "Neither am I. But love doesn't care about years. It's still you, Evelyn. It's always been you." The weight of 50 years lifted as she stood before him, the ache of regret mixing with the fragile beauty of this moment. She realized then that love had not died. It had simply been waiting, patient and unwavering. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as she touched his cheek. "I thought I'd lost you forever," she whispered. "You never lost me," he said. "I was always yours." The evening sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over them as though the world itself was holding its breath. For Evelyn, time seemed to blur, the past and present folding together into something new. Something whole. Behind her, Ethan's voice finally broke the silence. "Grandma." She turned, her face wet with tears, but glowing with something brighter. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady for the first time that day. "Thank you." You gave me back a piece of my heart I thought was gone." James looked at Ethan, recognition and gratitude in his eyes. "You must be her grandson. Thank you for bringing her to me." Ethan smiled, his own eyes damp. "She deserves this. You both do." For the rest of the evening, they sat on the porch, sharing stories, filling in the decades they had missed. Laughter mingled with tears, sorrow with joy. And though the years behind them were heavy, the time ahead felt like a gift. When the stars appeared above the quiet town, Evelyn looked at James and whispered, "Maybe we can still write one more chapter." He took her hand again, firm and warm. "Together," he said. And in that moment, Evelyn knew love had waited, but it had not faded. What began long ago had found its way back, not as a memory, but as a living truth.